Hey everyone, this is Ken Klippenstein with Breaking Point's Intercept edition. I'm going to be talking to you today about Twitter, big goings on at twitter.com. Elon Musk acquired it last week. I hope you're not learning that from me. You have to be living under a rock if you haven't heard that. But what I want to talk to you about it is a factor in Twitter that nobody wants to talk about, which is the reason I enjoy discussing it, which is Saudi Arabia's role in all of this, which is one of my favorite subjects because it's one of Washington's least favorite subjects. I don't know how widely known this is, but there's a Saudi billionaire prince that owns a significant stake in that company. And joined with me today is Khalid Al-Jabri, an expert on Saudi affairs, frequent commentator, to explain, what does that mean? How might that change under the new leadership? And just, what is the nature of this? Because we hear so much about foreign influence in relation to, Russia, China, Iran, the usual suspects. We don't hear a whole lot of it from our putative allies in the Persian Gulf. So Khalid, can you talk a little bit about, and before we launch here, can we start with the first element just to give people a sense of, so this is Prince Al-Walid, who owns a major stake in Saudi Arabia. When Elon Musk first made his offer to try to purchase it, he says, I don't believe the proposed offer by Elon Musk, 54.20, comes close to the intrinsic value of Twitter given its growth prospects, being one of the largest long-term shareholders of Twitter. I reject this offer. How is this guy in a position, Khalid, to reject an offer like that? He doesn't have the authority to do that. It was really extraordinary when I saw that.
I think, first of all, thank you for having me on your show again. I think the audience deserves to know facts about Al-Walid bin Talal. So the Saudis, through Prince Al-Walid and his holding company called Kingdom Holding, have owned a stake in Twitter since 2011. So this is not a new investment. This is not a new cash injection. This predates Musk's takeover of the platform. Simply put, Al-Walid and his holding company exercised their legal right by saying, we want to stay on board with the new ownership structure. Al-Walid is a very interesting character. He is the grandson of the first king of Saudi Arabia. The current king is his uncle, the notorious Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or known as MBS, is his cousin. And basically, he has never been a Saudi official, but he's widely known to be a billionaire, an investor, and a philanthropist. And basically, he is speaking from the kind of sense of authority as one of the major stakeholders in Twitter, believing that Elon Musk's original offer was not at the true value of his investment.
And can we get the second element up there to show people how Musk responded to that tweet? He says, interesting, just two questions, if I may. How much of Twitter does the kingdom own directly and indirectly? What are the kingdom's views on journalistic freedom of speech? Again, I said Saudi Arabia is one of Washington's least favorite subjects, and this is one of the reasons, because, it's this petrostate that we rely on for oil, but, its human rights record does not, shall we say, line up with how we like to think of our role in the international system and the kind of, support that we say we have for democracies. Khalid, can you speak a bit to if there was any response on Al-Walid's part, and like what kind of dynamic this is hinting at?
That was a very nuanced and smart tweet by Elon Musk. And I think when he says how much of does kingdom own directly and indirectly, he was alluding to what happened to Al-Walid bin Talal in 2017. Al-Walid, people should have a bit of sympathy with him as well, because he's also a victim of his notorious cousin MBS. He was part of scores of royals and businessmen that were taken to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in 2017 that was turned into basically a prison where reportedly people were tortured, including at least one case of death, and they were tortured into giving up their assets. There were reports about Al-Walid literally being hung up upside down by his ankles and forced to give up his assets. And since then, Al-Walid, who owns a stake in Four Seasons, he owned a stake in the New York Plaza, he actually owns a private jet that was dubbed as a flying palace, has not even been able to leave the kingdom. And I think what that tweet alludes to by Musk is like, I know what's happening to you. You're probably, I don't know if that's your own words or you're under duress. And basically, people have reasons now to doubt if Walid's decisions, including staying on board, is autonomous or something that was influenced by the state.
So it sounds like what Musk is hinting at here, which I appreciate on his part, because he's really saying the quiet part loud, which is that, is MBS behind this? Are you actually, acting independently here because you've been, rendered to this hotel and God knows what happened. And, in a regime like Saudi Arabia, it's not like the United States where there's a clear demarcation between private and government, and it's clear from, our conversations that there was a lot done at that point in time to appropriate the wealth of the individuals that were brought in there. Yeah. So do you have much insight into what role the MBS has now?
So, it's not clear. There's a reason actually that Forbes magazine stopped actually looking at Al-Walid's net worth post 2017, and the reason is nobody can get accurate data. But just a bit of facts as well. So all of Al-Walid's holdings are through his personal holding company. 5% of that is floated in the Saudi stock market, and up until May of this year, ironically around the same time that there was this whole kind of takeover Twitter saga, he owned 95%. People said that there was a backdoor agreement by which he would give the state part of his ownership in that holding company, but actually. In May, he signed an agreement to sell 17% of his holding company to the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia that is chaired by MBS. Ooh. So now, objectively, you can argue that the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia indirectly, through Al-Walid Holding Company and his investments, has an indirect ownership in Twitter. But again, this is not a function of Elon Musk's takeover. This is something that predated the takeover by more than 10 years, and it's a very important fact.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Can we get a photo up here of former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey shaking hands with Crown Prince MBS? This was, I believe, after Khashoggi, right?
No, this is actually 2016 when MBS was, received with red carpet treatment and, hailed as a messiah and a reformer. But what's really troubling is this happened a year after MBS agents recruited spies to infiltrate Twitter headquarters and stole
that's right.
Private information.
Another story that doesn't get enough attention. Justice Department, released a statement saying that, Saudi was literally operating a foreign agent, which is like that's the definition of foreign interference. How do we not hear more about this?
It's a funny story. Actually, if you look at the superseding indictment by DOJ, while MBS was in Virginia for his first visit to the U.S. as an official, his chief of staff recruited a Saudi engineer who was working for Twitter, and basically that engineer used Twitter laptops, flew with that laptop to Saudi Arabia, downloaded personal information of Saudi dissidents, and handed it over to the regime. And that happened in 2015. So it's really troubling to see the former CEO of Twitter meeting MBS after that act. Right. I have to be fair to Jack as well, and I don't know if he was aware of what had happened when it comes to this whole kind of spy and infiltration. But it's also troubling if you're the CEO of Twitter and you don't know that happened as well. Anyway, slice it doesn't look good for the previous management. And just to complete the circle, 2 months ago, there was actually one of the spies was convicted by a grand jury in a federal court in California for spying for the Saudi regime. What's really disappointing also in how Twitter, bungled the situation back in 2015 is the main person who handed the data to the Saudi government after the Twitter lawyers were alerted by federal agents. They interviewed him and he got scared and he left the U.S. the same night. So instead of being, facing accountability in court, he's now a fugitive in Saudi Arabia wanted by the FBI.
Wow. And our Customs and Border Protection didn't stop him. That's extraordinary to me. And not just that, but again, a literal spy. You'd think that this would be one of the things people mention when they talk about foreign influence. It's something I can barely find any reporting on. Can you talk a little bit about why is MBS so obsessed with Twitter? What is used to him? Because you mentioned one case, if he's bringing a laptop back and finding out about dissidents that you can map out and network and do God knows what to. What are his other interests?
Yeah, I think we need to take a step back because it's not just about Twitter. Twitter happens to be the most influential social media platform. MBS has a chronic history of being obsessed with social media and its influence to manipulate the masses and influence public opinion. I'm told by a senior Saudi executive that as early as 2011, and his dad wasn't even crown prince then, by the way, MBS had to be talked out of an idea to build the Saudi Facebook because he was told there's no value. The value in social media is a network effect. If nobody's using your network, it will have zero value. But he was aware of the power of social media because around that time, there was a series of popular uprising in the Arab region. People know it as the Arab Spring, where social media played a very integral part. And if you look at MBS when it comes to Twitter, he is super obsessed. He uses it for disseminating state propaganda. It is also a potent self-promotion tool. He also uses it for character assassinations of rivals. And it's also a harassment and transnational repression tool for online intimidation of Saudi dissidents abroad. Not only that, but recently we see how Saudi kangaroo courts, terrorism courts, are using Twitter as a pretext to sentence activists and dissidents
talk about that case, please.
to draconian sentences just for having a Twitter account. The most recent example of that is actually an American citizen from Florida who had some mildly critical tweets tweeted on U.S. soil. The moment he returned to Saudi Arabia for a vacation, he got arrested in the airport, and now he has been sentenced to 16 years in prison on spurious charges that are nothing more than just owning a Twitter account and tweeting on U.S. soil. So I know people have a lot of concern about freedom of speech and so on with the recent takeover, but when it comes to Saudi Arabia, it's a whole different level.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to see that botnet activity and the reaction, I would just encourage them to tweet anything at all about the U.S.-Saudi relationship that's critical. You'll very quickly see how rapidly these things come into.
I've seen your Twitter mentioned. Like it's basically like you've been a victim of one of the elements in which MBS uses the Twitter platform, which is online harassment. And what he tries to achieve with that is to try to break you down psychologically and deter you from writing pieces about Saudi Arabia. In the future. There's a recent case of actually a PhD student in the United Kingdom who went back to Saudi Arabia for vacation. She got sentenced for 34 years in prison, plus 34 years of being on travel ban. Her charges: owning a Twitter account and following dissidents. Imagine,
not even saying anything.
No, not even tweets. There were no tweets.
Jesus.
Imagine following a dissident can get you locked up for 30 years in prison in Saudi Arabia.
So what you've described, not just a threat to Saudi nationals, but U.S. citizens is the case that you mentioned before, which I'm amazed the State Department isn't. I mean, I'm not, not surprised, but disappointed. Let's put it. So now we have a chance where things might go in a different direction. Can you speak to? Do you have any sense of how Musk might run this differently, and how you hope that things will play out over the next few months?
I see, like, historically, people have had a lot of grievances with the Twitter platform that predate the Musk takeover. And with any change and any new ownership and management, it's fair for people to basically be apprehensive. But, I'm a contrarian. What I see right now, I think it's totally unfair to go on the offensive and attack Elon Musk for pre-existing grievances.
This is the thing. A lot of the reporting is kind of like discovering today that there's a Saudi role in the.
But all of this was very, very well known. The Twitter ownership, the Twitter hacking, the security vulnerabilities. All of these predated, Musk, and I was part of letters that were drafted to the previous management and that went unaddressed. So you can't blame Elon for pre-existing vulnerabilities that the previous management under the previous ownership structure failed to address. As a contrarian, seeing the half full part of the cup, I actually see a bit of optimistic pledges made by Elon. That very first second tweet that you showed, him interacting with now the second largest shareholder in Twitter. He interacted publicly with a Saudi royal who is the second largest shareholder in Twitter, basically criticizing the kingdom's crackdown on freedom of speech. No other tech executive has said that. So he's already miles ahead in terms of, at least, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia and the use of Twitter as an authoritarian tool. He's already miles ahead of that. He has pledged to defeat the bots or die trying. Basically, he has pledged to make the Twitter algorithms open source and therefore increasing transparency. And he pledged to actually have what he called a content moderation board, that no major decision about content or reinstating some of the blocked accounts or suspended accounts would happen without the council convening. I think all of the pre-existing vulnerabilities in Twitter basically offer an opportunity and a low-hanging fruit and a lot of quick wins for everybody. And if Elon genuinely follows through with his pledges, he would actually render Twitter a safer and healthier platform than it ever was by addressing issues that, for one reason or another, the previous management failed to address.
Yeah, what's interesting about all this is that the baseline for these, billionaire tech executives and their relationship with Saudi leadership. I mean, we just showed everyone the photo of the former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey meeting with him, but it was also Jeff Bezos met with him as well. All of these tech executives do. So it's like you compare that kind of glad handing to this type of relationship, and there's more tension there. So it's not just the Twitter reply that Musk issued, but also the fact that there was a very strange attempt by MBS to get into the electric vehicle business. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, if you want to put everything in context as well, you can even argue that this, MBS is a direct competitor of Elon Musk. They own 2/3 of a California-based electric car vehicle called Lucid, which is not doing pretty well at the moment. But still, they're actually competitors. You can even go back and say, I think at some point they've made a handshake promise with Elon about taking Tesla private, and basically walked out at the last minute and caused all sorts of problem with the SEC with Elon. So, and again, I just want to say at one point, as a Saudi, I actually think the engagement between tech companies and the Saudi leadership is actually a more potent tool to influence change in Saudi Arabia than arms sales. As you can see, MBS was touring, Palo Alto and Seattle and so on. And I think, again, this is my contrarian point of view. With the recent takeover, probably Musk has more leeway and leverage to influence MBS's behavior than Joe Biden himself.
Wow, that's quite a statement. Although, seeing what the White House has been doing, or rather hasn't been doing, maybe that's easier to believe. I mean, these statements, it's so frustrating. They come on and say, we're considering maybe slowing down some of the arms sales. It's like, come on. How is this how you're communicating to this guy after everything you know about how MBS, we've talked about this before, understands language of force?
Yeah, it's very troubling because we saw how during the campaign it was, either he's going to be made a pariah, he's going to face accountability, right. And then that ended up being a fist bump. And I think I said it last time, my expectation is the current promise of consequences would end up being just a wrist slap. Again, it's high time that the U.S. start acting like the senior partner in the relationship. I want that to happen, not because I have any personal grievances with MBS. I think it's the best hope we have as Saudis, Saudi people, as a Saudi country. I don't even want to, go and think what Saudi Arabia would like without a stable partnership with the United States. Nobody in his sane mind would bet on Russia today. Or even, China, God forbid, if China becomes a strategic partner with Saudi, we're going to end up with a surveillance state, a police state, and autocratic capitalism, and probably modeling what China did, including holding a million of their own citizens in concentration camps.
So I just want to close on the possibility. How likely do you think it is that Al-Walid might pull out his stake in Twitter? Because of a number of reasons, but the tension that exists between him and Musk, which there was no sort of, comparable dynamic under the previous leadership.
I would look at it as a business transaction for Walid at this point, notwithstanding the fact that his business decisions might not be fully autonomous. Again, he invested $300 million in 2011, and now they're worth $1.9 billion, so he clearly made a lot of money. Same time for Elon, if he wants to kick Al-Walid out, somebody needs to raise that money for him. But regardless of that, what I want to summarize is the Saudis have owned a stake in Twitter more than 10 years before the Musk takeover. MBS has infiltrated Twitter with actual spies, 7 years before the Musk takeover. Authoritarian regimes have been having field days on Twitter for as long as I can remember. Yeah. Twitter, has had concerning security vulnerabilities that have been, aired in public with the recent whistleblower long before the Musk takeover. As a physician, they train as a med school and residency and fellowship to be very solution oriented. And when patients come to my clinic, we spend a lot of time on the diagnosis and then, start talking, how do I make you better? I think everybody today knows what the problems are with Twitter. And I would like to see is less attacks on Elon Musk for pre-existing problems and more engagement in a solution-oriented dialogue, that would make Twitter a safe platform. There's a reason when I was in business school at MIT that half of our class discussions were about Elon Musk. You don't get to be the richest man in the world by luck or not by being smart. And I think people should judge him by his actions, not just by his words. And even if you look at words, he's made some very positive pledges that, if implemented, would render Twitter a safer, better, and a healthier platform.
There's no question that Musk is a wild card in all this, and people are kind of watching this thinking, okay, well, what is he going to do? I mean, we just had him come out talking about charging for the blue check. So it's like clearly policies will change. And I think that was sort of the question in the first 48 hours is, are changes going to be cosmetic, or will the substance change? No question the substance is changing. The question is, how and what is that going to look like?
I mean, we can consume ourselves in discussions about what would future change look like and be apprehensive of that. That's fair. But I'd rather basically spend our efforts and time in trying to fix the existing mistakes of the past that went unanswered by the previous management and ownership of Twitter, rather than being distracted by future hypotheticals that might never happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd agree. No sense of history among people generally. But it's an important thing to look at, and that I've been trying to report on is just the role of this foreign government, because we hear so much about the usual suspect, our sort of adversaries. But it's important to think about what your putative friends are up to too. So thanks so much for joining us, Khalid.
Thank you for having me.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.